Dear Cosmo babies, on this week's episode, we are talking about burnout. I'm your host, Annie MacArthur, and I have my co-host with me today, Erin Gray.
So we got a DM really recently from a student who is super experiencing burnout. And I think that that's so relatable. I especially think you and I are super burnout right now.
Yes.
I feel like the world is burnt out. Do you want to read that DM really quick and then we can dive right in?
Absolutely. Yeah. It definitely feels like kismet for sure. Like, like someone sliding in and like, I'm burnt out. It's like, I'm burnt out too. Me too. Mm-hmm. So it's like, oh my gosh, this literally came at like the perfect time. Like, let's talk about it, especially while you and I are in a place of burnout ourselves.
In it. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Let me grab that DM. So the DM that we got recently reads, "Hey, hair nerds. I'm currently in school full time and I'm working part time as well. I want to take education and I want to do social media, but I feel like I don't ever have a moment to myself and I'm totally burnt out. I want to cry all the time and I'm wondering if this was the right decision for me. Help. I don't know what to do and I feel so lost."
Yeah. And I think we've all been there. And I think that that's the first thing to realize is that you are not alone, right? Like, and I think it's so commendable when students they're going to school full time. They are still working, because for whatever reason in their life, like money is required, right? Like that's super relatable. And it doesn't just fall from the sky. And so you are exchanging time for money. And it's exciting to start this new career and there's all of these things that you want to be doing. And it's like, well, I would love to go to this class, but I'm scheduled to work, or I would love to pay for this thing, but I do not physically have the money. And then you start to feel like I'm failing. I'm failing at this. I'm failing at everything. I shouldn't have even done it. I'm not good enough for this. I'm never going to be successful. I'll never do, and it starts to like, the shoulds. It should look like this. It should be happening like that. I should be able to do everything. And you can't. And so I know that you and I experience that all the time.
A lot.
Especially because so much of our job happens on social media.
Yeah.
And comparison is the thief of joy, right?
Absolutely.
What I think has always been so great about our relationship is that we do know and see those things that trigger the other, and we're able to kind of help, like usually like when one person's like super struggling, the other person's able to come in and be like, okay, like what can I take off your plate? That's really hard when you're in school, but I think that there are definitely some things, some like tangible put into action right now things that can help our DMer. Do you want to talk about some of the things that you do when you're experiencing that super overwhelmed from, being in the salon, doing hair nerds full time, working with our clients, running a podcast, and also traveling internationally several times a year?
Yes, absolutely. Like I said earlier, like I think that this DM was so like meant to be because for me, speaking personally, like I am in such a place of burnout at the moment. And it was like, oh my gosh, like, okay, like it makes you feel not alone, like knowing that other people are in the same place as you. And it's like, okay, it's not just me. It is everyone going through the same experiences that I am, that are incredibly overwhelming. And these are the things that I do personally. I'm not a mental health professional. I don't say that these things are going to work for everyone, but for me, what I find the most helpful, sometimes I really have to pause. I have to kind of like pause and put everything on hold. I have to consciously make space for myself, which is not super easy for me because I am the type of person that struggles with the guilt a lot of like, well, I'm not doing enough. Like, well, if I stop and I take time for myself, then I'm not completing something else that I really need to be working on or working towards. And I have to find the space to pause, take a moment, do things that are going to not only make me feel better and help like calm me in that in that precise moment, but I also have to then make space for myself to kind of like refill my cup. And a lot of times what I have found over the years is that, again, for me, like refilling my cup looks like hair shows and education and going and being around my industry friends and those kind of things. But as the world has changed over the past couple of years, I am having to find other ways to make those moments and find those like similar instances to like refill my cup, or just completely change the way that I kind of like self-care, I guess. So I think like now in today's day, like what that looks like for me is like, I feel like it sounds so silly, but like, I love playing Zelda games. Like that is like, I can turn everything off. Like if I'm like playing Zelda or something like that. And so for me, it's like, yeah, like sometimes I need to take like a couple of hours, and it's not, because sometimes like when we're in burnout, it's not just like, oh, I'm going to take 30 minutes. I'm going to take 30 minutes and just pause and do that. Sometimes it's like, no, I need like half a day. Like I have to like shut everything off, and I have to just like not like dissociate or zone out, but I have to do something that's going to allow me just to like reset myself and like recenter myself. And so for me, that looks like playing video games, which is funny because I'm literally wearing like my Star Trek shirt. And so I'm like, the nerd in me is going to come out really hard right now. Or it is like watching those shows that are kind of like my comfort shows, which for me is Star Trek, like wearing my Voyager shirt, and doing things that allow me to just like shut my brain off and not have to think about the things that cause those like guilty, repetitive, like voices in my head telling me, you know, you have to do more. You have to keep going. You have to find the time. You have to, you know, I don't know if anyone listening would even know this reference, but like a movie that Erin and I really love is Empire Records. And I always hear like Liv Tyler's voice in my head all the time. Like, there are 24 usable hours in every day. And I'm like, oh, Liv Tyler, get out of my head.
No one is living their life like her in that movie. So.
I know.
Or with her wardrobe. Yeah.
Yes.
I love that you talk about decompression, you know, and that for you, that looks like playing your Switch, you know?
Yeah.
And I've been at your house and seen you be like, I just need like 30 minutes of my game. Okay, cool. For me, so I struggle when I'm not getting enough sunlight. I think that really triggers probably some seasonal depression. And so I really like to either sit by a sunny window or, you know, if it's decent outside. I also live in California, so this doesn't work, you know, if you're in Michigan, but I like to sit outside for a second, and I will take my work with me outside and work and do those things that I need to do. But I make a point to I make a big tumbler of water in a glass that I really love, and I'll get a snack, and I'll put on my sunglasses and a floppy hat, and just sit out on the back patio, and our puppies play outside, and that for me helps me still be able to move forward in some of the things that I need to do, but find a place that I don't want to throw myself off of a bridge. Yeah. Because I think we get there really fast, right? Now, sometimes I do get to that point where it's no, there's nothing that I can do in this moment. And I think getting really honest with yourself about, okay, I'm really tired and I'm really burnt out and I'm crying and I have a ton of anxiety. And sometimes that means taking a nap, because I know that when I am really tired, I'm moving really slow on all of the things that I need to get done, and you and I talk about that a lot. Hey dude, go to bed because you're tired. And so instead of staying up late and trying to get it all finished, get decent sleep. So that you're so much more productive in those hours where you are well rested. Annie will work all day and not eat. That's obviously not me. So I make sure that that I'm getting snacks. I feel better when I'm eating better. I mean, it's all of those self-care things that we know we should be doing. But I also really kind of shut down in a cluttered or dirty space, and so I think like for our student who sounds like living out of their car, basically, like you're going to driving to school and you're putting on your makeup on your way to school and you go to school all day and you've got 10 mannequin heads in your trunk. And like, now you're going to work and maybe you're like a hostess at a restaurant or kind of whatever that looks like for them. For me, I always am really, really happy when my car's like vacuumed out and wiped down. It's not often that happens, but wiped down. And so like whatever space it is that you're living in, I think if you can take a second, refresh it so that it feels good again. That's definitely, I work best in a very small space in my house that really feels good to me. And I think that kind of adjusting the energy around things helps, and a lot of times, like I will listen to, I have a hypnosis app that I've used, oh my gosh, well over a decade.
Yeah.
And it's this one little guy from England, and they're really incredible self-guided hypnosis, like meditation type things. And some of them are 10 minutes and some of them are an hour. And it's literally the only way anyone can get me on a plane, because I definitely panic during that takeoff. And
we'll put the link to this app in the description as well.
Yeah. I mean, I want to say it's like maybe $10 a month. It's not for the faint of heart for sure. But I got to tell you, I have told so many people about it in our industry. And then I'll be at a show and they'll be like, oh, I started listening to Darren Marks. Like, good. Changed your life, right? Like, whatever, I stopped smoking or whatever. And some people, it works really well. I do really well with self-guided meditation, and I'm able to like imagine and visualize those things. I know, Annie, you don't respond as well to it. And so I think it's really finding those things that work for you, like, so identifying, I'm super burnout, what can I do? If modifying your schedule is not an option and you can't, maybe give up that Saturday morning shift and sleep in one day or kind of whatever, what can you do around the things that you are required to do to find some relief? Because if you don't, your body will shut you down.
Yeah.
And you won't have the option. Like, you'll get sick or you'll just totally have a meltdown and you'll have to call in to school or, to work, and you can manage this or it can manage you.
Absolutely.
But it's going to be managed.
Absolutely. I think the mindfulness part of everything is the hardest part for a lot of people, about being mindful, about knowing where you're at and where your body is at and how much you can handle or how much more you can handle or not handle, or if you've reached your limit or if you've gone past your limit.
Right.
And,
you flew right on past it.
Yeah. And I just like thinking about back to when I was in cosmetology school, I feel like it was a little different for me. I don't know a lot of the context around our DMer. I don't know their age or what their life looks like on a day-to-day basis. But for me, when I went back to school, I was a little bit older. I was in my later 20s and I was supporting myself as well. So it was, not only was I in school full time, I had to work to pay my rent. And thankfully my family was, somewhat helpful during that time and helping me through it, which not everybody has, which, which did make a huge, huge difference and a help for what I was trying to, succeed in my life and like be successful and do the things I wanted to do. And, but it was hard. Like looking back, like it was tough. Like I did have a job. I did go to school full time. And I made that decision consciously when I went in and started, before I even signed up for cosmetology school and was talking to them about the options. They did have a part-time option, but I had to have a very serious conversation with myself of, am I going to do this if I can get through it in 11 months? Context around that. I did already have a license. So I for aesthetics. So I didn't have to go as long as standard cosmetology. So I got some credits towards it. So I was able to get done sooner. So, like, can I do this in 11 months and just like push through, just push through and get through this next year of my life? Or do I take the 2-year option and go part-time, but then I'd be working full-time and going to school part-time, and that would take me 2 years. And it's like, I had to have a very serious conversation with myself. And it was like, I don't think I can do the 2 years. I don't think I will be successful and finish. So it was like, if I'm going to do this, this is my option. I had to know myself. I had to know what my boundaries were and what I was capable of doing and how I was capable of like sustaining myself. And that was the option I took, but it was really hard. It was so hard. I cried a lot. I was driving to school in the morning, just like in tears, like we can do this, like
we're crying at my desk. Yeah.
And it just like, I think that we have to be really conscious in what we can put on our plates, because even after school and after graduation, it's still going to be a lot, no matter what course you take in the industry, whether you're going to an assistant program or you go straight behind the chair or whatever you end up doing in the industry. Like there's always going to be a high demand on you because of the clients that we're working with. We have to show up our best for every single person because they deserve it, And I think that's why it's like, if you are in school, start to understand what you need yourself and how you can create space for yourself and what is going to work best for you to not only refill your cup, but to allow yourself to like decompress, because what I have found is that there is a difference between recharging myself and decompressing. And sometimes I have to allow myself to totally decompress from the burnout before I can even start to recharge my batteries, Totally. And I think learning how to understand and listen to your body and your mind is really important in those beginnings, because that'll help you set those boundaries later to where you won't be me just like crying and being like, I have to do another thing today,
We cried before we filmed this one.
We did.
So
like total vulnerability and total honestly. I am not stoned right now. If I look stoned to you because my eyes are red, it's because I was crying. We tend to demand a lot from ourselves, especially in professional beauty. And I say that because I have had this similar conversation with so many people in our industry. Everyone feels like this because it is very demanding, not only mentally, but physically.
There is a great Facebook group, and we'll link it in the description. And it really is hairdressers supporting hairdressers with mental health.
Yes.
And the group like kind of allows stylists and students to be like, hey, this is what's going on in my salon or in my school or like with this particular client. And here's screenshots of like my messages with them. I'm not sure what to do. And I don't know, should I fire this client? Like kind of whatever. And you get a group that is there to support you, but also like really helps you set boundaries and like healthy boundaries. And like, hey, you, in this instance, you don't owe anybody an explanation or, like, and just reminding you like, no can be a complete sentence. Like you can just say no. There are a lot of places, that you can go to kind of get that communal support. And I think that that's great. I do think always be really careful that misery loves company. And so you always want to make sure that you're finding a really positive place to receive support. The group that we'll link, I feel like is a pretty positive place. But just, remember, like everybody can have a bad day and people can say crazy things. And just because one stylist, across the country thinks that this is how you should handle something, always take those things, like do a gut check and make sure that it's still a really positive place for you. I also would say that for me, when we start to kind of find these places of burnout, getting off of social is really helpful.
Yes.
Because when you're living on social, it's really easy to get burnout, and you are seeing the highlight reel of everybody else's life, and you start to feel really alone. I'm obviously the only person who isn't living in this like perfect space, in this perfect house, getting doing 12 workouts before 7 a.m. and doing all of their things and getting it all done. And, then having a healthy breakfast, lunch, and dinner and have zero stress and doing a 45 steps skincare at night because people aren't showing their real lives.
Yeah.
And that is what exists on social media, and it will make you very unhappy.
Yeah.
Very quickly.
Especially, I think, from a student's perspective. Like, I think that it's so easy for a student, because I did this too. I had this exact same experience as a student. I think you look at Instagram, which is just so infiltrated with, here's how to do this, here's how to do that, 5 steps to this, build your clientele. Like, look at this perfect life that I'm living. And we all know, like, because people will tell you, like, this is not real life. And we all know that. We know that social media is not real life, but it is still so difficult, especially from a student, when you are starting from zero, to look and just be like, holy crap. Like, I'm supposed to be doing all of this. Like, I have to do everything. Not only do I have to go to school and show up and learn these things that I'm supposed to be learning, but sometimes, like, and I say this because this is how I felt as well, was that I just felt so behind constantly. And I felt like I'm never going to catch up. How am I ever going to catch up? How am I ever going to build this clientele? How am I ever going to, be this successful hairdresser that I want to be? And I think you have to go one day at a time. You have to remember that as a student, you are in a moment of learning. You are never going to stop learning, unfortunately, in this industry. Like, it is a lifelong process, which, if you listen to our episode with Lauren and Roderick, they talk about cosmetology experience just starting as a process, because it is a forever process. I love the way that they talk about that, because school is just not a beginning to end, which is how I know I looked at it. I have to get through this moment in time so I can get to the end to start a new beginning, where I think that we have to change that mindset of every day is a process, and every day just give what you can of yourself that day. And if you I don't want to sit here and be like, don't go to school or don't do this. But if you wake up and you're just like, I have zero that I can give today to anybody else, and I don't even have enough for myself, maybe you do need to consider taking the day. Don't do that often. Go to school. Like, please go to school. Just go to school and get through it and get your hours. But there are going to be moments, because I had to do it. There were probably a couple of times that I was just like, I can't today. Not only, like, if you're going to school and you're working and you're trying to have a social life and you're trying to build a clientele and you're trying to show up on social media, and it's like there's you're doing constantly
12 full-time jobs there.
Sometimes if your body says no, maybe that's your answer.
No means no.
No means no. And again, don't do that a lot. Try your best to show up. You are paying for school. Go get your money's worth out of it. But sometimes you have to,
be kind to yourself.
And not feel guilty about it. There's some really incredible journal type books out there. And I actually saw one recently and I was like, oh man, the universe knows, or I must have said burnout near my phone at some point or something. But like all of these burnout journals are coming up, but it's like, I have gotten those journals before when I've been in difficult places in my life, and it's like, okay, I'm going to try it. And it's like, I've used them to work through. They give you prompts, things like that. And it sometimes it helps, it doesn't, it's not for everyone. Erin's meditation apps, they're not for me. That's not where I feel the best. But sometimes like journaling can help, or even just a prompt, even if you're just thinking about it, the prompt that they give you, even if you're not a journal person, but sometimes having that moment to like think through, like, what is making me feel like this, and how can I make myself feel better right now to get to tomorrow? Because it's tough. Our industry demands a lot of, we demand a lot of ourselves as well. And I think as creative people in general, there is a lot of mental health issues and things like that float around our industry. And
totally.
I think it's just finding those moments that you can take to yourself.
My mom, when I was a little girl, used to say, it's always brighter in the morning, Erin. And you're like, okay. But as an adult, it really is. Today may be really, really hard, but tomorrow's a new day. It's always brighter tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I would say, you are not alone. You are not alone in this. And Annie and I always try to be there, in the DMs and show up for our community. And so let us know. We're happy to point you to resources. If you're ever feeling like this is not something you can manage on your own, definitely I would reach out to a medical professional.
Absolutely.
Zero shame in that. And I think it's so healthy. We are for sure not medical professionals, but I think that the world has a lot of things to help us, right? A lot of things to bring us down, but also there are so many, like we are not living in the 90s anymore, which is where Annie and I grew up. And you certainly didn't talk about being sad or things like that. And now we live in this world where you can't openly talk about them. So I think just really kind of finding those things and tools that help you, but keep in touch with us because we want to know how it all shakes out.
Yep. You can find us on Instagram at the Hair Nerds. You can also find our education at Scissor and Moth.social, which presents this podcast to all of our Cosmo babies out there. Both of those are always open. The DMs are always open. Any other FAQs, any other questions, concerns, comments, you can always slide into our DMs. You can leave them on this podcast episode. You can find this podcast on Apple iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Music, everywhere podcasts play. We thank everyone for always listening to this podcast, for our growing community of Cosmo babies and professionals. And we hope that this might help someone who is also in a place of burnout.
Join the club.
Yes. So thank you everyone again for listening to this episode, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.